God will take care of you. Will he? Or will she? Or will it? I've always envied people who were very comfortable with that word, God. Some people just seemed to have a feel for it, and that wouldn't be me. God and I have sort of had a little bit of a rocky road along the way. So I wanted to spend some time this morning talking about this word, God. Has anybody else had any problems with the word God? Oh, good. Thank you, because I really just don't want to have this discussion with myself. And so I'm so grateful to have a little bit of company in this challenging topic. You know, when I was growing up, God was kind of like Santa Claus on steroids. He knew when you were sleeping. He knew when you were awake. He knew if you had been good or bad. And you didn't just get coal. If you believed, you got to go to heaven. And if you didn't believe, or if you wandered off into that naughty zone, you went to hell. Dang, that's serious stuff, man. At least Santa Claus gave you another chance, like the next year, you could kind of man up and get back into that nice zone and leave all that naughty stuff behind. And so I kind of struggled with this idea of a God that was watching out over me, judging me, and punishing me, and that there was this definitive black and white way that I was supposed to interact with God. And I was kind of afraid of God. And I was told you were supposed to be afraid of God. And my parents were afraid of God. And yet, their fear, however way they translated it, they were kind and considerate, generous, wonderful people. And so that concept of God for them worked well. And so I sort of felt kind of left out. And about 11 years old, I decided, screw it. I don't believe in God. Okay, so maybe I didn't give God enough of a chance, but at 11 years old, I felt like I'd had enough. And so I proudly called myself an atheist. Maybe an agnostic, just to sort of cover all your bases. Anybody ever done that where you really don't think there's a God, but you're thinking, I'll just call myself an agnostic, and then when I die, maybe I'll get a little few extra credit points that'll get me into heaven. So I kind of wandered around in that zone of not knowing, not caring. And I don't know about you, but I found that didn't work very well either. I showed up on Unity's doorstep in 1991, and I had tried marrying people to be happy. I had a few husbands, and that didn't seem to work well. I tried partying too much. And have you ever noticed in the middle of the party, you feel like, oh, this is really working, man. But then afterwards, not so much. And I tried working too much. People really reward you for working 80 hours a week. And yet somehow I still had a hole in my heart that none of those things could fill. And so when I wandered into Unity in 1991, I couldn't even imagine that there was really any kind of a church that I would be comfortable in. But I found this place. And guess what? They didn't say God or Jesus too much around here. Whew. Amen, sister. I could stay, okay, I could stay through the service. No, a little bit of Bible verse, not too much. So it felt pretty comfortable that I could just leave that whole issue that I had with God alone. But it kept coming back to me. And so I just found that I had to keep searching for an answer, even though there were times when I felt like I didn't even really want to know. It seemed like the question would find me, even if I didn't want to find it. And so in 1999, I read a book that some of you may have heard of. It's by an ex-nun. She ought to know about God. Her name's Karen Armstrong, and she's written many books. She's a wonderful writer. The 4,000-Year Quest of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I read this, and I was sure that somewhere in here I would definitively find the answer of God. And I did get really excited about it. In fact, I got so enthusiastic about the book that I remember in September of 1999, I was in Duke's office and I was standing in front of his desk and I was telling him how enthusiastic, how wonderful this book was. It was fantastic. I couldn't imagine all the details and the history that I was learning about God. And I'm going to warn every single one of you. Be careful about expressing enthusiasm around Duke. He's not here today. Duke, if you're watching the video, please stop, turn it off, don't listen to anything more. Immediately, Duke got enthusiastic too. He said, "You should do a talk." I had never done a talk. And I started backpedaling. Well, it's not that good of a book. I don't really think I need to do anything. It's okay. But I took the challenge, and I kind of made myself crazy. I spent 2 months, and I memorized a talk that was 20 minutes long. And I was so exhausted that I didn't give a talk again for another 9 years. So maybe I learned something. But what I found is that suddenly I just wanted to better understand, at least just for me, what this whole idea of God was all about. Why wars were fought over him, her, it, whatever it is. And what I love about Unity is it is a place where not only you are allowed to question God, but you are encouraged. Find that within yourself, that the answer, whatever it may be, you may have an experience of God, and the person sitting right next to you may have a completely different idea and experience, and that is okay. And so being here has helped me kind of wrestle with my own upbringing and my qualms and concerns about this word God. And when Karen Armstrong is talking about this term God, I realized that as I reflected on what had happened over 4,000 years, is the word God tends to get hijacked. That it starts out that somebody has a mystical experience. They have this experience that is indescribable. People try to put words to it. People are transformed by the experience, and then other people want to know, you experienced God, what was that like? Try to describe it. What were you doing at the time? And then suddenly, I was standing like this, and I had my hands like this, and I experienced God. So then we have a whole religion of people that are getting in line on Sunday morning to stand like this in an attempt to experience God. And what ends up happening is that the concept of God gets hijacked into a way to unify a civilization and a group of people. It turns out that dogma and doctrine, and forcing everybody to believe the same thing, enables a group of people to live more harmoniously together. And then our definition of God can be the right one. And I can feel good about it. And all those other people are wrong. And so this is the way from time to time to time that God gets hijacked. And so we can talk about it even starting with Judaism. Judaism in the initial beginnings, you couldn't even say the word God. They would say Yahweh. God was the wind. God was that word that was unspoken. There was Kabbalism in Judaism that was this interior journey that you would take in order to be able to experience God. And it was only for the elite, that they thought only the scholars and the rabbis could possibly have this experience of God. And so the rest of Judaism became a dogma and a doctrine and a way of living and a way of understanding who you were within the context of the rest of the world. And that whole mystical experience of God somehow got left out of that. And so what happened with Christianity? Some guy named Jesus came along. And he had an experience of God. And imagine if you had come in contact with Jesus and asked him what this experience was. If we look at the words that are written down in the Bible, this experience of God with Jesus was so personal that the only words he could find to describe it was, my Father. That sense of being so loved and supported that it was if your Father was caring and nurturing you. Who wouldn't want that experience? And yet Jesus' words were taken, and later on somebody misunderstood. Oh, he's your dad, but not mine. And somehow Jesus ended up being the Son of God. And then long about 300 years AD, he's the only Son of God. And we don't get to have that experience. We have to go to somebody else in order to understand it. And so Christianity gets hijacked as well. And it becomes fundamentalism, where you have a set of dogma and doctrine. And just follow these rules and everything will be okay. And what's fascinating is exactly the same thing happened in Islam. Muhammad began with having this mystical experience. He said that the Quran came to him in a dream, that he had some experience of wanting to create a more just society, but he wanted to do it through this mystical experience. And then these Islamics and these Islamics started fighting, and then the Sunnis and the Shiites, and you're not doing it right, and you're not doing it right. And before we know it, we're back to where we started of God being a unifying force of them versus us. My God, the way I experience is the right way, and yours is the wrong way. And again, in Islam, what happened is that around the 8th or 9th century, there was a group of people that were seeing what was happening with the factions that were being created. And they said, wait a minute, we got to take this back to the source. Muhammad was having a mystical experience. And so they wanted to simplify their life, and they dressed in coarse clothing of wool. And my Arabic isn't very good, but I understand that the word for wool in Arabic was sawuf. And they became known as Sufis because they wanted to go back to having that mystical experience of God. A very personal, so personal that if you've ever read Rumi, he is talking about his beloved and that he is the beloved. There's a wonderful little Sufi poem that I wanted to read. I am he who I love, and he whom I love is I. If you see him, you see me. And if those see him, you see us both. And so this idea that we can all have this incredible, personal, individual, unique experience of God, and it can be mystical and it can be profound. We can be here together and we can improve ourselves in a material way or on the outside and kind of operate in the world more skillfully. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we could come together here and support each other in having this experience of God? I had an opportunity last week to go talk to Father Thomas Keating. He's been a monk. He's 90 years old. He's been a monk for 70 years. I figured if I was going to go talk to somebody about God, a Catholic monk for 70 years probably knew something about God. And he was fascinating. If you guys don't know Father Keating, he actually started practicing Zen Buddhism in the 70s and got kicked out of his monastery for it. So he's a bit of a radical Catholic priest, a Catholic monk, kind of my kind of guy. And I had gone with him all fired up that I was really gonna, kind of go to the mountaintop. And he actually lives in Colorado, so I really did go to the mountaintop and ask him about God. And before I had a chance to do so, he was sitting there and began to talk. And he said, God, that's just a nickname. What? It's just a placeholder. It's just a pointer. It's trying to show us the way to that indescribable experience, the essence of our being, that which is in all things, the pure potential, the possibilities, whatever you want to call it. That we can each be our own researcher about what God is. And Father Thomas Keating has come up with a practice that he calls centering prayer. And I thought that we would do so in the meditation today, to have a little experience. That he calls it, that it's not just one experience of God, but that he calls it the spiraling, either spiraling inward or spiraling upward in whatever way that seems to happen with you. But imagine that in this moment, that we can all have an experience of God. And it can be personal and precious and unique. So let's take those thoughts into meditation. So as we take this precious time of silence, you can begin with a few slow, full, deep breaths. Bringing awareness into this room and into your body. Taking this precious opportunity to let go of all things and to just simply be present. In this practice of centering prayer, you can choose a word like peace or God or calm or whatever word that is for you that brings you back to reminding that this is a precious opportunity to experience God. We just simply sit in the silence and we listen. Allowing that experience of God to come to us. Resting in this fertile ground, this pure potential. And imagining that in fact God can speak through us, that we are a manifestation of the Divine Spirit. That we can let go and let God. By simply saying one simple word, like peace. And in the silence, listen. In the silence. And as we leave the silence behind, we can take with us this knowledge, this understanding, this possibility that by spending some time in the silence, that we will better know God. And so it is.
Do all the good you can, by all the means you can.